What's up, my know-it-alls? Well, it's time for a brand new series. We're going to start with you, The Last of Us. Obviously, that's the one that's going on Sundays on hbomax. We had a busy weekend. Anyway, that's why we're getting this one late, but I will be doing my best to get these out sooner after the episodes air. Episode 1, man. Episode 1. This is a show based on a game, and it's no game. It's no joke. This episode was intense, and I am all about it. Baby Know-It-All loved it, Mrs. Know-It-All loved it, and we're definitely in for it. So, all right, let's get into the review. In 2003, a mass fungal infection sparks a global pandemic and turns its victims into bloodthirsty attackers. Joel flees with his daughter Sarah as the fungus starts to spread, but she's killed by a soldier who attacks them, while Joel is saved by his brother Tommy. 20 years later, Joel lives in the Boston quarantine zone, managed by the Federal Disaster Response Agency, FEDRA. As a smuggler with his partner Tess, when Tommy fails to contact them from his location in Wyoming, they try to buy a car battery from a local dealer, but it's instead sold to the Fireflies, a rebel group that opposes FEDRA. Attempting to retrieve it, they find the deal has gone awry, and Marlene, the Fireflies' wounded leader, begs Joel and Tess to take young Ellie to the Massachusetts State House in exchange for supplies. They're caught by a soldier while sneaking out. Ellie stabs him when he tests them for infection. When the soldier tries to shoot her, Joel beats him to death. Tess realizes Ellie is infected, but Ellie promises them she will not turn. They enter a biological contamination area to flee the pursuing FEDRA soldiers. This comes from one of the creators and directors of the HBO miniseries Chernobyl. The series, so let's just get into it. I'm not even gonna sit here and barely lead much. This is an amazing story. I've never played the game, but I've heard enough about the game to kind of have a basic understanding of what the premise is supposed to be. And so, and seeing, of course, the young lady who plays the character of Ellie, specifically Bella Ramsey, you remember her from Game of Thrones. She was that really awesome little head of her house who's like who has all these guys following her. Like, yeah. Well, anyway, she's a little bad A. Pedro Pascal being as Pedro Pascaliest, and that I mean, I'm getting tons of these like hardcore Mandalorian vibes. Not really, but you know what I mean. And that he's playing a character who has to essentially father someone else. Anyway, it's hard not to be spoilery because there's a whole lot going on, but I'm going to have to be. Obviously, you heard the description at the top. If you don't know by now, Mr. Know-It-All does spoilers. Come on, really? That whole opening sequence with Nico Parker, who plays Sarah Miller, who plays essentially Joel's daughter, Joel's daughter in the very beginning. They make us invest in her, man. Literally, they take us through this entire opening sequence with her. We're following her. It's Joel's birthday. It's 2003. It's funny. Mrs. Know-It-All was like, I hope this show's not going to try to be like The Walking Dead. We already got The Walking Dead. I want to see what's going to happen. And it was because we're used to slow burns. Once things start popping off, and I mean everything from the creepy vibes that she's getting, and it's so funny because we know. So Baby Know-It-All and I are on the sofa, Mrs. Know-It-All sitting in the recliner, and she gets up to get something, and the whole time Baby Know-It-All's like, what are you doing? Aren't you listening to the news? Aren't you listening to the police? Stop, blah, 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 blah. And Mrs. Know-It-All's like, why are you yelling at the TV? Why are you acting like this? She's like, just because you know out of the thing, they clearly don't know. Is this another world where people don't know about zombies? And I'm like, yeah, no, I hear you. But still, it was but then you get to the part when things start going bad, and I guess again, I've watched several other reviews from people who are familiar with the material. I'm not familiar with the material, so I'm coming at this completely clean slate, like I hope most of you are. So it wasn't a surprise for some people, but it was super a surprise for us, because we fully, mind you, knowing full on that Nico Parker, Sarah, is not in the thing, in any of the promotional material, I'm like, oh, she's gonna go, oh my gosh, something bad's gonna happen, And sure enough, she ends up dying. She gets shot. Maybe it's me as a father, but that scene hit so hard. Baby Know-It-All and I were both sitting there sobbing on the sofa, and we're just like, I just can't. It was such a moment, and the way Nico Parker deserves something. She did such a phenomenal job. That moment was so real and so visceral that I was in. I was like, wow, okay. And then you go 20 years later. So we're in 2023. Before all this, by the way, I loved how they set the groundwork with this old 1960s interview that may or may not even be based on a real interview, where they talk about the zombie ants. Do yourself a favor. I refused because I've seen it once already and it terrified me. Just Google zombie ants. That's a thing. And it's terrifying. Now, mind you, you take an awful lot of. This is ultimately some form of science fiction, and that it takes a lot of liberties with some things. But at the end of the day, you get where they're going, and it didn't come off preachy. I know there was definitely some parts where they talk about, they're insinuating about global warming and whatnot, and whatever. It's fine. So you have this really interesting engagement where it's 20 years later, and you're getting to see the world as it's evolved, and there's clearly these quarantine zones, which may or may not, they're more of the whatnot, and Tommy, Joel's brother, has now joined the Fireflies and the Resistance. Resistance, not really resistance. 20 years, not a resistance. You're whatever, rebels. And so he's out and about, but he hasn't responded in a while. So Joel's getting worried. You find out Joel sells drugs on the side, which is dope. I'm like, really, dude? Literally? But to the actual FEDRA officers, which is hilarious. But yeah, so then, and they give us these moments where you're finding out. They give us this the nuance of what they're doing. They showed us so much. They didn't tell us anything. They showed us everything. And so you understand immediately when this kid stumbles into town, they test him, the tester reads red, which tells you, okay, there's something bad. And everyone's nice and calm. Nobody's freaking anybody out. And ultimately the kid's put down because he's infected. Ellie, for those of you not playing at home, not paying attention, or who are playing at home, or aren't playing at home because it's a video game, whatever. Ellie is clearly immune to whatever this is going on. And that means that she's got antibodies, and that means they need to be able to do something. So 20 years later, we have finally built as a culture an immunity to whatever this fungus thing is that's taking people over. Also, I hate fast zombies. The other thing is, I don't think they're eating people. I think they're just biting them to try to infect them, because of the way when they're hunched over the bodies, there's like this movement they're doing that doesn't feel like I'm eating. It feels like they're infecting, and so I don't know why I did the Pac-Man sound just then. Anyway, so that was an interesting approach to the entire thing. It ends with Joel ends up, because there's this whole battery thing where with Anna Torv, who plays Teresa Tess. Might recognize her from Fringe. I loved her in Fringe. I'm sure she's been in other things, but Fringe is the thing that we recognize her from. Mrs. Know-It-All was immediately like, isn't that from the chickie from Fringe? And I was like, yes. I also don't see her in much of the marketing material, so I don't think she's going to be around very long. I don't know the story. Don't spoil it in the comments section. I'm kidding. We're all about spoilers here. Whatever. Spoil whatever you want. Go into my comment section at your own peril. So, yeah. So I watched in the beginning, toward the beginning, Mrs. Know-It-All was worried we were going to get some kind of Walking Dead vibes. I watched The Walking Dead for 6 seasons. I stopped right after when they introduced Negan, the end of that introduction, the long wait for the summer, and then the first episode, I was done. It just did me in. I was over it. This has not got those vibes. This is very different vibes, and I'm down for what this is doing. See, Walking Dead always felt like we were walking aimlessly and we don't really know what's going on, and the story's going to kind of just carry us, and you're just with us on the journey. This feels different. There's a goal. Joel has a goal. So you're going to get from A to B. You're going to get from A to Delta to D. And you're going to have to go through B and C to get there. So I feel like you have the path that's a little different. You're going somewhere on a journey that's going to tell a specific story. Okay, that's where we are. That's the difference to me between this and something like The Walking Dead. So yeah, man. All right. Well, listen. Comment below. Let me know what you thought. But there you go. Now you know. And if knowing is half the battle, you're halfway to being know-it-all yourself. So what's the know-it-all index for me for The Last of Us, episode 1? I think I'm gonna go. This was an excellent startup episode. Excellent. So I'm gonna give it an 8.5. I'm gonna go 8.5 with this episode. We'll see how they take us and see where they go. I'm waiting for them to impress me. I am liking the fact that this first episode was a slow burn on purpose. You don't care about Sarah dying unless you watch the entire build-up in the opening. Unless you spend the time there, you don't understand who Joel is. The minute it all went down, Mrs. Know-It-All stood up and goes, "That's it. From here forward, Joel's not going to trust anybody, especially police or the authority figures of the military like that." And I was like, yeah, man, she's absolutely right. Absolutely right. So they set up those things. So anyway, all right, guys, comment below. Let me know what you thought. We'll talk to you next week. Never forget, everyone loves a know-it-all.